Welcome to HFY Codex. If you love epic sci-fi stories where humanity shines, you're in the right place. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for thrilling HFY adventures. Join us and be part of the journey. The cold silence, snow fell quietly across the broken ground, covering everything in white, hiding the blood, the ash, and the silence that came after death. The small alien girl lay beside her mother's cold body, her thin arms wrapped around the lifeless form, her skin pale blue and her eyes half open. But she did not cry. She had no more tears left. The village was gone, burned to the stone, its people either taken or killed, the buildings smashed into pieces, the air still thick with smoke from weapons fire, but no one came back. Not the soldiers, not the scavengers, not even the wild creatures. Only the wind moved now, curling around the dead like a whisper. But something else did come. A human. His name was Eli. Once a soldier, now a wanderer, searching through ruins, not for war, but for anything useful to stay alive: food, medicine, maybe a working battery or a heat core. He walked with a rifle slung over his back and a pack that had seen too many years of rain and sun. He stepped carefully over rubble, stopping when he saw what looked like two bodies lying together under a thin sheet of snow. At first, he thought they were dead like the others. But then, he saw her fingers twitch. "Wait," he said softly too. "No one." And knelt down. He brushed the snow from the smaller figure, revealing a child no more than 7. Her face too thin, her lips dry, but her chest moved barely. She was alive. Her eyes met his, wide and unblinking, filled with something deeper than fear, something hollow. She did not flinch when he reached for her, did not speak, only held tighter to the strip of cloth in her hands. A piece of her mother's torn cloak. Eli wrapped her in his coat, his fingers trembling not from cold but from something else, something like guilt. He carried her through the snow, the wind trying to steal the warmth from her body. But he kept her close. His camp wasn't far, an old transport ship buried under a landslide, hidden from satellites, kept warm by a salvaged power cell and layers of metal and dirt. He laid her down on the cot, gave her water, warm broth. But she didn't speak, didn't move, only stared. He didn't know her name, didn't know her language. But he didn't need to, not yet. That night, Eli sat beside her as she slept, the fire casting shadows across the walls of the old ship. He thought about the war, about the orders he once followed, about the people they called enemies. He looked at her small frame, her bruised arms, her sunken cheeks. This was no enemy. This was a child who had survived something no child should. Outside, the snowstorm grew worse, howling like the ghosts of the dead, shaking the metal walls, making the heater flicker. But inside, it was quiet until he heard it. A soft sound, a whisper. He turned and saw her sitting up, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark, her lips moving silently. She wasn't talking to him. She was praying. Or remembering. He couldn't tell. She lay back down without a word, curling into the coat, still clutching the cloth. Eli sat there, watching, not knowing what to do. He had rescued wounded soldiers before. He had helped lost animals, hungry strangers, even once a wounded enemy who bled out in his arms. But this girl, she was something else. In the morning, she woke before him and stood barefoot on the cold floor, staring at the door. He offered her food again, and this time, she took it, slowly, silently, bit by bit. She chewed like someone who had forgotten how Eli tried to speak, using simple words. "Name," he said. Pointing to her, she looked away. He tried again. "Where are you from?" Still nothing, but she was listening. She didn't look at him like he was a monster, just like someone she didn't understand. He noticed then faint marks on her arm burn. Scars, not fresh, old, faded, but still there. He said nothing about them that night. She moved to sit closer to the fire. She didn't speak. But she didn't flinch when he came near. A step forward, a small one. But it mattered. Outside the shelter, in the trees beyond the hill, a scout drone passed overhead, its red eye blinking. Once, scanning heat signatures, it moved on, but it had seen something, someone, the human and the alien child, and somewhere far away, in a bunker full of cold men and colder decisions. A screen blinked to life, target detected, but inside the quiet ship, Eli leaned against the wall. Watching her sleep again, her breathing was stronger now, more steady. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight he had kept her alive, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Asterisk the girl who wouldn't speak. Asterisk the girl still didn't speak. Days passed, and she watched everything with silent eyes, always clutching the same piece of cloth like it was the last thing she had left from her world. She ate now, though slowly, always careful, always small. Bites, never wasting a crumb. Eli didn't ask questions anymore. He knew she wouldn't answer. Instead, he let her watch him fix broken heaters, clean and sort old metal pieces from junk piles, hoping maybe something familiar would comfort her. But every time he turned around, she was staring not at him, but through him, like she saw something behind him he couldn't understand. One morning, Eli woke up to the sound of scratching. He sat up, rifle in hand, ready for anything. But it was just her. She sat on the floor near the wall with a piece of burned metal in her hand. Using it like charcoal, she was drawing circles inside circles, strange lines and shapes he didn't recognize. A symbol repeated again and again in the center, 3 stars around a teardrop. He stepped closer, trying not to scare her. "Is that where you're from?" he asked gently. No answer. But she kept drawing. Eli didn't erase it. He let her keep going that night. Something strange happened. He woke to the soft hum of the comms panel, the one that hadn't worked in months. The screen flickered to life for just a second, showing static, then the same symbol she had drawn. Then it shut off. Eli stared at the dead screen, unsure if it was real or just a trick from his tired mind. He looked over to the cot. She wasn't there. He found her standing outside the ship, barefoot in the snow again, her eyes glowing in the moonlight, lips moving in a soft whisper. She turned slowly, looked at him, and said one word: home. Then she collapsed. Eli rushed to her, wrapped her in his arms, carried her back in, and set her down by the fire. She didn't wake for hours. When she finally opened her eyes, they weren't filled with fear anymore, only sadness. And something else, something older. She sat up, looked at him, and placed her small hand over her heart. Then tapped his chest once. "Eli," she said, soft and clear. He froze. She had listened all this time. She had learned his name. He pointed at her gently. "And you?" She hesitated, then spoke. "Sorry, it wasn't just a name. It sounded like a song. Like something passed down from stars and history and memory." From that day on, she began speaking little by little. Not in full sentences, not always words he understood, but enough. She watched the snow fall and whispered words like loss, sky, and ashes. And once she said, "Mother," while looking at the cloth in her hands. Eli didn't know what to say to that. He simply sat beside her and stayed quiet. Then came the dreams. Sari started waking in the night, shaking, crying without sound, her breath quick, her eyes wide, as if she was still there in the flames of her village. Eli tried to comfort her, but she would push him away. So he stopped trying to hold her and just sat nearby until the panic passed. Eventually, she would crawl closer to him on her own and fall asleep near his shoulder. It wasn't much, but it was something. One afternoon, she pointed at the broken communication tablet Eli kept on a shelf. She walked to it, touched the screen, and placed her hand over the back panel. The screen flickered. He hadn't powered it in weeks. She whispered a word, too soft to catch, and the tablet flashed the same symbol from her drawings. Then powered off again. "What was that?" Eli asked. She answered with 2 words, "Memory seed." It meant nothing to him at first, but she said it again, then pointed to herself. "My mother gave it to me," she said slowly, "before the fire." Eli felt his chest tighten. He asked her carefully, "Is it inside you?" She nodded. "My people remember through blood." She said, "I see what my mother saw. I feel what she felt." Eli could barely breathe. Sari was more than just a survivor. She was a carrier of her people's history. She wasn't just a child, she was a library of sorrow. Later that night, when the fire cracked and the wind howled outside, she looked at Eli with eyes that didn't seem like a child's anymore. "You were a soldier," she said. He nodded slowly. "You fought my people?" He looked down. "Yes." He whispered. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She only said, "But you didn't kill me." And that was enough for her. But outside, above them, far away, the drone that had passed days ago was now part of a larger scan network. The image of the human and the alien girl was flagged. A signal had been sent, orders had been given, and someone, somewhere, was coming. The memories in her blood, * the snow didn't fall that morning. Instead, the sky was clear to clear. Eli knew that kind of silence. It was the quiet before a storm inside the shelter. Sari sat near the fire with her eyes closed, lips moving. Slowly, whispering in a language older than Earth's oceans. Eli didn't interrupt. He had learned not to. She wasn't just talking to herself. She was remembering. Her mother's memories flowed through her like light through glass, showing her things that had happened long before she was born. Sari saw cities in the clouds, glowing towers built from living crystal. People who spoke in thought, not voice, and mothers who passed their knowledge through blood, not books. And then came the burning ships, the falling stars, and the humans. She gasped as the fire filled her lungs again, even though she sat in the safety of the bunker. Eli rushed to her side, grabbing her shoulders. Steadying her breath, he said gently, "You're safe." She clung to him tightly, eyes wide and wet. "I saw her last moment," she whispered. "I saw the soldier who dropped the firebomb." Eli didn't speak. He didn't have to. She looked into his eyes and added, "He wasn't you." Still, he could feel the weight of every weapon he'd ever carried. Later, Sari showed him how it worked. She pressed her palm to Eli's chest and closed her eyes. At first, he felt nothing. Then, something warm and deep pulled at his thoughts. He saw her memories, not in words, not in pictures, but as emotions, as fear, as love, as pain that wasn't his own, but still hurt like it was. He stumbled back, heart racing. "What was that?" he asked. "Our gift?" She said softly, "We remember for those who are gone." Eli sat down slowly, staring at the fire. He had fought her people, but he had never truly seen them until now. That night, he couldn't sleep. He stepped outside into the frozen dark and looked up at the stars, wondering how many of them held lives they didn't understand. A light blinked in the sky, then another, too low, too close. He cursed under his breath and ran back inside. "Sorry," he said, "we have to go." She looked up at him, confused. "There's no time," he said, pulling supplies into a bag. "They found us." She didn't ask who. She already knew. Human soldiers didn't forget things like alien memory seeds. They feared them, and when humans feared something, they destroyed it. Within minutes, they were moving through the snow. Eli holding her hand tight as they crossed the old paths he once marched during the war. He knew this land like scars on his back. They hid in a collapsed communication tower. As drones flew overhead, scanning with red eyes, searching with cold patience, Sari stayed quiet, crouched beside him, her breathing calm even as the ground trembled beneath heavy engines in the distance. Eli whispered, "They'll burn the whole forest if they think you're here. Then we go to the black trees," she said. He looked at her sharply. "How? Do you know about those? My mother's memories?" she answered. "She said they're sacred, even to your kind." He nodded. It was true. There were places left untouched by bombs-blackened forests where nothing grew anymore, marked by war but protected by superstition. No soldier wanted to go there. They walked for hours, moving through ice and fallen branches until they reached it, a place where the trees stood like bones, charred black and dead, yet still whispering in the wind. Here they made camp again. Eli started a small fire under stone and metal to avoid detection. Sari sat close, eyes scanning the trees like she was looking for someone. "She's here," she said softly. "Who?" "My mother." Eli didn't question her anymore. He had seen enough to believe the impossible. That night, Sari took the cloth she had carried since the day he found her and placed it into the fire. At first, he tried to stop her, but she shook her head and said, "It's time." The cloth burned blue, then white, then vanished without ash. A pulse of light shimmered around the camp, unseen by machines but heavy in the air. "She's part of me now," Sari whispered, fully. Then she looked at Eli and said something that froze his blood. "They're coming." "How do you know?" "Because they're afraid of what I am." Eli stood, grabbing his weapon, checking the charge, but she reached for his hand. "You don't need that," she said. "You need to choose." "Choose what? To protect me," she said, "or to run." The trees groaned around them like old spirits waking up. Far in the distance, the red lights began to glow brighter, and in the sky, a ship moved toward them like a knife through the clouds. Asterisk, she found a new mother. Asterisk, the black trees stood still, frozen in time, their burnt branches twisting like claws. Under the moonlight, Sari didn't hide. She sat calmly by the fire, her hands resting on her lap, her small face glowing with peace, not fear. Eli paced nearby, his old rifle clutched tightly, his heart pounding louder than the wind. "They'll be here soon," he said. "I know," Sari replied softly. Her voice was steady, stronger than before. "You don't understand what they'll do," he said. "They won't ask questions. They won't care that you're just a child." Sari looked up at him with ancient eyes. "I'm not just a child anymore," she said. "I'm what they tried to destroy." Eli didn't argue. He had seen it himself, the memory sharing, the energy that pulsed from her skin like quiet thunder. She wasn't a weapon. She was a voice for her dead people. She stood, walked to the center of the clearing, and pressed her palm against the cold earth. The symbol 3 stars around a teardrop glowed beneath her hand, burning into the ground. "Like fire without flame, it's a beacon," she said, "for anyone left who remembers." "You're calling more of your people?" Eli asked. "I'm calling anyone who still believes we have a right to live," she said. Then she turned and looked at him. "You can go if you want," she added. "You've done enough." Eli stared at her for a long time. He thought of the war, the orders, the silence of guilt he carried for years. "No," he said finally, "I stay." Sari nodded once, as if she already knew he would say that. Hours passed, then the engines came. Massive ships hovered above the black forest, their lights scanning the ruins like eyes searching for a ghost. Eli raised his weapon as 3 armored soldiers dropped down with a hiss of gas and steel. "Step away from the target," one barked through a helmet speaker. "She's just a girl," Eli shouted. Standing in front of Sari, "She's a Class 3. Memory host," the soldier replied. "Orders are to contain and extract. Lethal force approved if necessary." Sari stepped out from behind Eli and spoke clearly. "No more running." The soldier raised his weapon, but before he could fire, The ground shook from the edges of the trees. Figures emerged tall, thin, with glowing blue eyes, wrapped in armor made from crystal and bone. Other survivors, other memory holders, Sari had called them. The soldiers froze. One turned to the ship overhead. "We have multiple targets and known numbers." Sari stepped forward, raising her hand, and every alien figure mirrored her movement. A quiet pulse moved through the air, gentle, warm, but heavy like truth. The soldiers dropped to their knees, their helmets cracking with pressure not from violence, but from memory. They screamed not from pain, but from the visions entering their minds. They saw villages burning, mothers screaming, children buried in rubble. The truth of the war, not propaganda, not orders, but raw living memory. Eli fell to one knee too, his chest tight, his eyes wet. He saw it all again, but this time he saw her face in every image. When it ended, the soldiers didn't get up. They lay still, breathing, but broken. The ship pulled back into the clouds and vanished without firing a single shot. Sari turned to Eli, her face pale but calm. "It's done," she said. Eli dropped his weapon and hugged her tightly. "You stopped a war with memory," he whispered. "No," she replied. "I stopped it with truth." The forest was silent. Again, the figures faded into the shadows, their presence now part of the trees. But Sari stayed, and Eli stayed with her. They found a new village, hidden, quiet, filled with those who had lost everything, human and alien alike. There, they built something new. Not a shelter, but a home. Sari ran with other children, laughing in the sun, her old cloth now hanging above the doorway like a flag. One night, she curled beside Eli near the fire, her voice soft. "Thank you for bringing me home," she said. He smiled and replied, "No, sorry, you brought me home." The stars above blinked gently. And for the first time in years, the night was just night. Not a warning, not a memory, just peace.